Parsha Pairings with Jeff and Sherry. I'm Jeff Friedlander.
And I'm Sherry.
And we're glad you joined us. This week's Parsha is called Yitro, or Jethro. It comes from Exodus chapter 18 through chapter 20. The Haftorah this week is Isaiah chapter 6 verse 1 through chapter 7 verse 6 and chapter 9 verses 5 and 6. And our Brit Hadashah, or New Testament reading, is Matthew chapter 5 8 through 20 and chapter 19 16 through 26. This Parsha is one of the more dramatic Parshas. This is where we're going to receive the 10 statements. We're going to get some setup of how the congregation of Israel is to be organized. And we actually are calling this commentary the wedding. This is the wedding of Israel to God. And the terms are set forth, the agreements are put in place. And so we want to dive into that and see, what does it mean to be married to God? How does this prepare us as the followers of Messiah? How do we look at that? And each of these chapters kind of builds on itself. We're going to see organization, we're going to see laws and boundaries, and we're going to see anointing in the Spirit. We're going to see supernatural wonders. So it's 3 chapters. They're not that long. But wow.
There's a lot in it.
It's power-packed.
There's a lot in it.
So we'll start in chapter 18 where we get into Mo.
So 18, we find ourselves still at the mountain of God, and we have Moses gets a visitor. His father-in-law, Jethro, Yitro in Hebrew, comes to visit him. And it's very interesting. Something you'll note as you read this is almost every time Yitro's name is mentioned, it says Yitro, Moses' father-in-law, the father-in-law of Moses, Moses' father-in-law. Yeah. It's repeated over and over. So there is this, as Moses and is writing this, he is showing great deference and honor to his father-in-law. Yeah. And so he comes with him, and he brings his wife and his 2 children. Now, his wife, her name is Zipporah, and that's
Moses' wife.
This is Moses' wife, right? Zipporah, and that Jethro brings the 2 children. Yitro brings the 2 children. One of them we already knew about was Gershon, whose name is a combination of 2 Hebrew words: ger, meaning outsider, and shon, meaning there. So it's this idea that when Moses had Gershon, this is before he went back to Egypt, he named the son based on his circumstance. Listen, I'm an outsider here. Yeah. I don't belong here, and he named his son after that circumstance. Yeah. But then his second son, we don't really have a recording in the scripture of when this son is born, but his name is Eliezer. And it also is a combination of 2 Hebrew words. El or Eli means my God. Wow. And Ezer is the word that means helper or one who delivers. So he names the second son my God who delivers. Yeah. So it would be so wonderful to know, when did he have this child, to mark this idea that my God has delivered me.
Yeah, you got to feel like it's sometime after he's heading towards Israel or heard from God or something.
Yeah. Now, interestingly, this word Ezer is the exact same word that is used in Genesis to describe Eve as Adam's Ezer, his helper. Yeah. We also see this in the Psalms when David refers to God as his Ezer, his shield, his helper. Yeah. So this idea that Moses is really connected into, that God is my deliverer. He's the one who has brought me through all the trial that I've been through. And they come to this mountain where Moses is encamped. Of course, remember, this is the mountain that he had the encounter of the burning bush. Right. Back in Parsha Shemot of Exodus 3:12, we read about that encounter, that the Lord said that I will surely be with you, so that will be the sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you brought the people of Egypt, you will worship. When you brought them out, you will bring them back to this mountain to worship me.
So he's going back to where God told him to come back to. Meet me here.
Meet me here, and it'll be the sign to you that I've done this. So the chapter goes on. They basically have a little chit-chat. How you doing? How things been going? How's your this? How's that? They kind of talk. And then in verse 11, Jethro declares to Moses, he says, now I know that Adonai is greater than all gods, because he knows what's happened.
Yeah.
He understands. I mean, Moses has just told him about the whole Exodus, how God delivered, and he recognizes Adonai is greater than all gods.
Yeah, and note here that what Jethro is saying is, where Moses lived for 40 years, he married into a family of polytheism, a family of multiple gods that served idols, served many gods. And Jethro is still that.
Right.
And so Jethro looks at this and says, well, you certainly proved it. Your God is the God of gods. It's not that there aren't other gods. And we know scripturally that's true. There are other gods. There's many gods that God created. But our God is the God.
Right.
He is the creator of all the others. And so this God, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, Jethro recognizes and realizes this is the God. Right?
And he does an interesting thing. Jethro presented a burnt offering, and that word is olah, which later gets codified as part of the sacrificial system. An olah, a burnt offering, is one that's completely consumed and its scent rises up.
And so we understand two things. One, before Sinai happens and we have this exact law, we do have this law. It's in the heart of people to offer a sacrifice to God. It's in the heart of the people to pray over their sacrifices, give sin to their sacrifices, etc. And so Jethro, this is a practice that was happening before Mount Sinai. This is a practice that was in even Midian culture and custom. And when he comes, he recognizes, hey, your God's the God. I'm going to go sacrifice to this God. I'm not going to be on the outside of that. I want to serve. And he recognized it. So he has an interesting story in that.
And then the next thing that happens in this verse 11 is Aaron also came along with all the elders of Israel to eat bread with Moses' father-in-law before God. And this is kind of that peek into the fellowship offering.
Yeah.
As you bring an offering before the Lord, you get to eat it with the priest. And so we have this idea of this fellowship. This offering has been given, and they're all rejoicing in who God is, rejoicing in God's deliverance of the people.
And what's interesting is, if you just want to get a little crazy about this, we kind of see, we've talked in the past and throughout Scripture, there's this idea of the priest, the prophet, and the king, right? And so here we have a prophet, Moses, is the lawgiver and the prophet. We have a priest, Aaron, of the priesthood, who's going to become the tribe of Levi will become the priest. Not yet. We're not there yet, but it's prophetic. It's going to happen. And then we have Jethro. Well, is Jethro the king? Well, interestingly, he's not the king of Israel, because we don't have any kings in Israel at this time. But his name means my excellency, or your excellency. And how are kings referred to? As his excellency.
Right.
And so there is this, he was kind of a royal of the Midianites. He was a royal in that sense, even though he's not a royal for Israel, certainly was never a king of Israel, was never in the Israelite community in that way, but he is an authority figure to Moses. He is an authority figure in that line, and he was of some type of royalty within that kind of culture, if you will. So it's an interesting idea. There's a little bit of a foreshadow. It may be a stretch for some, but it's a little bit of a foreshadow of a king, a prophet, and a priest getting together and having a fellowship around a sacrifice to the God of all gods, and then trouble.
Right. So Yitro on his visit is observing all that Moses is doing, and Moses goes and does what he's always been doing. He sits and he hears everybody coming. He hears their complaints. He judges among them and tells them what to do, how God should do things. And Jethro observes, you're exhausted, Moses. Yeah. You cannot possibly do this. So this is where this form of government begins to settle in. Because Yitro instructs Moses, says, listen, you can't do this by yourself. You need to divide this work up. And this is where we get the division of labor that happens here. And he tells him to go and gather capable men to sit in judgment and take the laws and tell them. And then the most difficult cases come to you, right? Yeah. So you don't have to take all the burden on you, which is a great observation and a really good advice that he gives him. But this word capable that's used here in the Hebrew is the word chayil, and it means strength. Find men of might, men of wealth and men of an army mentality, men of character and valor. And he tells them that these men are to fear God.
Number one.
They're to be men of truth.
Number two.
And they're to hate bribery.
Number three.
And we're actually going to see bribery show up in next week's Parsha in some of the laws God gives.
And so the bottom line is, here's a lesson for your children. Teach your children these things. Hey, fear God.
Mm-hmm.
Put God at the top of everything. You want to be a leader? You want to be a person that people trust? Want to be an influencer, today's language?
Mm-hmm.
Be a person that fears God. Number two, tell the truth.
Yeah.
Buy the truth and sell it not, the proverb says. You know, hold on to truth with all that you have. Don't let it go. And number three, whatever you do, don't be one who tries to manipulate people or the system.
Right.
Hate bribery. Don't go and use language to try and work your way around something or pay off something or deceive somebody to get something. Build on faith and trust by fearing God, and you will be an influencer.
And we see when we move into fast forward into the first century with First Timothy's letter, he records what an elder, the qualifications of an elder, the qualifications of someone who's going to be ruling over or looking over the care and caretaking the people of God, much like what Yitro is instructing Moses to do. In 1 Timothy we read that in order to be an elder, you have to be beyond criticism, the husband of but one wife, clear-minded. You have to have self-control, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not addicted to too much wine, not violent but gentle, peaceable, free from the love of money. There's that bribery part coming in. Manage your household well. Keep your children under control. There's this idea of the fruit of your life is going to reflect the fruit of your heart. Yeah. And you don't want people leading who aren't leading in their homes, who aren't living respectable lives, who aren't walking in the ways of God. And this is what we even learn from this Parsha.
And I would say, to close out this chapter as we move into the next chapter, that idea of leadership is something we need to really step up our game in the community of faith.
Yeah.
It should be a place where, we understand those who are called to lead, those who are called to teach, those who are called to shepherd others and be in that role, they have to decide, are they willing to walk a higher line? I've met people who have said, I realized and I appreciated the integrity. I was called, but I knew I didn't have what it takes, or I wasn't willing to be judged at a level that I knew I would be judged at. So I just decided to do something else. I can respect that because it says, you may be called to go do this, but do you have what it takes to decide I will be all of these things?
Right.
I'll fight extra to get rid of the flesh, those types of things. And it's a high calling. And so I have a lot of respect for those who accept the calling to lead others, to guide others, to teach others, to be judges, to make the decisions between parties. All of that requires, some work and integrity and character.
You bring up a good point that, sometimes when God calls you or reveals the calling to you, you may not be in the position to handle the full weight of it. And we saw that with Moses.
Yeah.
When Moses receives the calling and understands what God has intended for him, what's his first thing? I can't do it. I have stammering lips. I can't stand before these people. You got to help me.
Yeah.
So he sends Aaron, and we made note of this, that when you watch through the plagues, you watch the leader rise up, because it begins in the first 2 or 3 that Aaron is the one that speaks for Moses. Yeah. And then it's both of them going. And then by the time you get to, I think it's 6 or 7, plague 6 or 7, it's all Moses.
Yeah.
And now we don't have Aaron speaking to the people on behalf of Moses.
He's grown into his position.
He has allowed himself to go through the testing and allowed the character of God to come out in him. Yeah. And so that's a great, some people, you're right, can be afraid of, well, God, what are you asking me to do?
Yeah.
I'm not qualified. And you may not at that point. You may have some stuff you need to work through.
Yeah.
But God can walk you through that to accomplish what he wants.
And as you take steps of faith in that, God will strengthen you in that. All right, so Moses listens to his father-in-law. He does what he says. He sets up the teams. Everything starts to work better. And now he leaves, and Jethro leaves, and we get into chapter 19. And it says, in the 3rd month after Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel, had gone out of the land of Egypt, that same day they arrived in the wilderness of Sinai. They traveled from Rephidim, came into the wilderness of Sinai, and set up camp in the wilderness. Israel camped there right in front of the mountain. So here we are. We're finally here. And it's been about 50 days, roughly, in the middle of 40 to 50 days since they left. Seems like we've been doing it forever, but since they left Egypt and got through the Red Sea and went through all these tests and all these things we've been talking about, they now finally have landed in Arabia, and they're at the mountain. They're staring at the mountain.
Now, something to take note of, this is the third month, as you said. This is how we know the timeline. The Bible tells us. We also know this is the month of Sivan, we call it today Sivan. It's the third month. And this is actually the month that we celebrate Shavuot, which is going to come about. We're going to hear about that in a few parshas. And what has been connected to Shavuot is this idea that this is when the 10 words were given, is on this mountain on Shavuot. So we're preparing for that time.
So they're in front of the mountain. Verse 3 says, Moses went up to God, and Adonai called to him from the mountain, saying, say this to the house of Jacob, and tell Bnei Yisrael, you have seen what I did to the Egyptians, how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now then, if you listen closely to my voice and keep my covenant, you will be my own treasure from among all people. For all the earth is mine. So notice, God says there's not a nation on the earth that doesn't belong to him. He is the owner of all people. But he says to them, if you do what I'm telling you, you stay in the covenant, you're going to be my treasure, my special treasure. Verse 6, so as for you, you will be to me a kingdom of Kohanim and a holy nation. These are the words which you are to speak to the Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel.
So there is so much in these verses. So a couple of things I want to bring out just very quickly. In verse 5, there's actually, the way the English words this, it says, now then, if you listen closely to my voice and keep my covenant. All three of those words, the word listen, closely, and keep, in Hebrew are a form of the word Shema.
So it's the same word with some different endings and beginnings.
But it's that Shema, if you hear and obey, listen and obey. He's reiterating that. And again, we said this is what is commonly thought of as this wedding, the wedding of God to Israel. So God is laying out, here's my vow to you.
Because a wedding is a covenant, right?
It's a covenant.
When Sherry and I went and got married, we made a covenant with God.
Right.
And we made a covenant with one another. And so a wedding is a covenant. This is what he's saying. Look, you have to Shema, which means you're going to hear it and you're going to do it. Okay, you got to Shema. This is how we're going to be in covenant together.
And what does he say? You will be my own treasure. He's promising, I'm going to make you my treasure. And this word treasure is segulah, and it means my possession, peculiar treasure, and special. This is the first time we see that word, the first time God says, you're my treasure. If you're going to follow and obey me, you'll be my treasure. Actually, Malachi 3:16 and 17 tags into this and uses this word also when he says, then those who fear the Lord talked with each other, and the Lord listened and heard. A scroll of remembrance was written in his presence concerning those who feared the Lord and honored his name. On the day when I act, says the Lord Almighty, they will be my treasured possession. I will spare them, just as a father has compassion and spares his son who serves him. And you will again see the distinction between the righteous and the wicked, between those who serve God and those who do not.
So he connects Malachi, right? He's connecting this treasured possession as a prophet, and he would have certainly known the calling of the marriage here, the wedding between Israel and God, that they were called to be a treasured possession. Now, some of you may be saying, okay, Jeff, are you and Sherry saying that only Israel or only the Jews are the treasured possession? Well, there's a couple things here, and we're not going to get into all the details now, but Paul writes to us and reminds us that when we were part of the nations, we were far off from God, but as we became part of God, we became foreigners who had accepted the faith. We became those who now served Adonai. And a great reference for this is Isaiah 56. If you want to just go read that on your own, you can get a picture of this. We serve Adonai. We're now called to the holy mountain. We're part of the covenant. We're part of the house of prayer. And Paul writes to us and says, you are now the commonwealth of Israel. You are citizens of Israel. And right here in Malachi, we even see that prophesied.
Yeah.
Because he says, you're going to be a treasured possession. Verse 18 of Malachi 3, as Sherry read, said, you will again see the distinction between what? Israel and the nations, Jews and Gentiles? No. Between the righteous and the wicked.
Yeah.
So he's saying those who are part of Israel are those who have faith, those who believe, those who walk in my ways. That is who is Israel, those who walk after me. In fact, Romans chapter 1 and 2 detail that as well. So we want to be part of that treasured possession. That's what we want.
That's part of our covenant. When we come into covenant with Yeshua and we accept his sacrifice, then we come into this as well, this marriage. And this is where we get this imagery of the marriage supper. Yeah. That we are the bride of the Messiah. That's right. So he commits to them that you'll be my treasured possession, my treasure. And then he also says you will become a kingdom of Kohanim.
Yes. What does Kohanim mean?
Of priest. Kohanim is priest. And
which, by the way, just for those who have the name Cohen, it's been passed down for thousands of years. The name Cohen is of the priesthood.
Now, this word for kingdom, this is the first place we really start getting this idea of a kingdom. Now, I want you to remember, though, how peculiar this has to sound in the ears of the Israelites that are hearing this. They're a homeless group of slaves. They've just been miraculously delivered, but they've never known how to rule. They have been ruled. Yeah. And God is saying to them, I'm going to make you a kingdom. And that word is mamlakah, which means kingdom, dominion, reign, sovereignty. He's telling them, you're going to be part of something that's going to be ruling and reigning. All you've known is Pharaoh, a false deity, one who claims to be a deity, one who has ruled you cruelly. You've never known what it is to be the one that's going to be ruling. And a kingdom of what? Priests.
It's the whole kingdom of it. It's not just one group. Later, it's going to become one tribe. But that wasn't the original mandate. And in fact, Sherry, we can take this mandate where he's saying, I'm going to make you a kingdom of priests. In fact, the whole kingdom of Israel is going to be priests. You're all going to be it.
Well, we need to talk about what does a priest do?
Yeah, hold on a second, because we're going to talk about what a kingdom. You're all going to be kingdom priests, and then that jumps us back to Genesis 1, right out of the gate, where it says, Genesis 1, verse 26, 27. So let us make man in our image and in our likeness. And so he created them, male and female, and he made them, and he said, be fruitful and multiply, rule and subdue the earth. Right. So we were given a mandate at creation to be exactly what this word is: dominion, mamlakah, to rule, to be the sovereign over. And he's calling Israel into that role and saying, okay, you're all going to be kingdom now, priests. Right. I'm making you a kingdom, and in your priesthood, rule. Right. Rule the way I wanted the whole world to be ruled in the garden. We blew that. Okay, let me pull some people out so I can show the rest of the nations how this should look. That's right. And I'm now making this nation that rulership. They're going to blow it later, and we're going to get to a tribe out of that nation, Levi, and eventually we're going to get to a king, and eventually it's going to come down to Messiah, which is going to open it back up to the body, to the believers, the people, and eventually back to the Jews, Judah, and against the world again. So this is a whole pattern that goes back and forth. And so, Sherry, what is a priest then?
So a priest is one who acts as a mediator between God and the people. Yeah. They're the ones that later we see will do the sacrifices. They're the ones that are going to put the blessings on the people. They're the ones that are going to be teaching about the Word of God. This is what the job of a priest is. And when we think about we are a kingdom of priests, what does that mean? Our job on the earth is to be that mediary, leading people, pointing them back to the Father, back to the ruler, back to the King of the kingdom. And he's making this covenant with them. If you'll do what I say, you're gonna be treasured to me, my possession, and you're also going to be this kingdom that's gonna rule. And that's going to be giving and parsing out this word and this rule in myself to the earth.
It is awesome.
I just love this.
So then he moves on, and he tells them, not only are you going to be a kingdom, you're going to be a treasure, a kingdom of Kohanim. Now you're also going to be, and he calls it a Kadosh Goyim, a holy nation. Mm-hmm. You're going to be the holiness of God, right?
Well, and holy, that word Kadosh. Yeah. Kadosh. Set apart, anointed, different than, kadosh. We want to be holy. It doesn't mean that it's when we come under a holiness of God, we are stepping out of that which we know, which he's, again, speaking to who they are. Come out of what your norm is. Come out of what you've known. You're now holy and set apart. Out of the nations, this is who you are.
That's good.
And 1 Peter 2:9 picks up on this when he says, "But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people of God's own possession." I think that Peter knew this covenant. He incorporates all of these pieces. So that why? Why is God putting this and bestowing this on his people? So that we may proclaim the excellencies of him who has called us out of darkness into his marvelous light.
Boy, is that beautiful.
This all connects back into, we spoke on last week's Parsha about the separation that we are called to live in light, not darkness. The entire creation narrative begins with darkness.
Yeah.
There's chaos and darkness on the earth, and God brings light into it.
Yeah.
We are to take that light and we are to bring that light back into the nations where they're still in darkness, they're still in chaos, because we have that marvelous light in us.
And it's incredible that we get that opportunity, and what Peter does here in his letter is clear and evident. Hey, if you believe, if you follow, if you listen to God, I called you to be the royal priesthood. You're the chosen race. You're the chosen people. Who? Anyone who chooses to follow.
Right.
Be born again, be changed, be transformed. Now follow and do it, right?
And here's what the people said.
In verse 7, back in Exodus now, we're in chapter 19, I think still, right?
This is 19. We're in
19, chapter 19, verse 7. Here's what the people, so now it's been laid out before them, right? So here we go.
And so Moses went, called for the elders of the people, put before them these words that Adonai had commanded him, and all the people answered together, and they basically said, I do.
Yep.
They said, everything that Adonai has spoken, we will do. When Moses reported the words of the people to Adonai, this is where this covenant is solidified.
And I think it's incredible.
I will, and they said, I do.
Yeah. And there's two things that you should note here, maybe. One, Moses goes and reports what the king has said, what the Lord of Lords has said. The people say, we will, right? It's community. It's a group effort. We are the body of Messiah. Right. I am not the body of Messiah. I am a part. I'm a piece. Sherry's not the body of Messiah. She's a piece. She's a part. We together. And so here it is. They together said, we can't be married alone.
Right.
I don't marry myself. We're married.
Right.
We as a community say we do. And then Moses goes and reports it back, which I just find that a funny phrase. Like, God wasn't hearing that. God is listening. God knows what is said, but it's like Moses is being set up as a foreshadow of an intermediary.
Right.
He's teaching us that we got to speak to God, but we got to go through something to get there. And in our case, it's through the blood of the Lamb, through Yeshua. He is the prophet and the intermediary. But at this time, Moses is the one who makes the conversation happen. And so it goes on, Sherry, I guess, in verse 9. So
picking up in verse, I'm going to pick up, he tells, Adonai said to Moses, well, I'm about to come to you in a thick cloud so that the people will hear when I speak to you and believe you forever. Then Moses told the words of the people to Adonai. Adonai said to Moses, go to the people, sanctify them today and tomorrow, let them wash their clothing, be ready for the third day, for on the third day Adonai will come down upon the Mount Sinai in the sight of the people. this is going to be they're getting prepared for the wedding day. They're getting prepared to be dressed appropriately, to be cleansed, to be sanctified, to be prepared. And again, what are we waiting for? We're waiting to become that spotless bride. We're preparing ourselves to be ready for when the King comes. He's already made the covenant. Yeah. He's already made in a Jewish ceremony, you have a what's called a ketubah that you actually sign it's the covenant you're making. Yeah. I am committing to you, and we're going to be nobody else, right? But then there's still the ceremony. He's preparing them for the ceremony.
And note, just for those who have ears to hear, it's the third day.
Right.
So you can read that later. Verse 12 says, "You are to set boundaries for all the people around, saying, be very careful not to go up onto the mountain or touch a border of it. Whoever touches the mountain will surely be put to death. Not a hand is to touch it, but he will surely be stoned or shot through. Whether it is an animal or a man, it will not live. When the shofar sounds, they may come up to the mountain." Then Moses went down to the mountain, from the mountain to the people, consecrated them, and then they washed their clothing. And he said to the people, "Be ready for the third day. Do not draw near your wives."
We add a little extra purity to it.
There is nothing here but focus on God.
Yeah.
And there is no way to go near the temple, the mountain of God. It's a clear line. And this is a line that I think we need to draw, and we're going to find this out as we move forward in Parshas. God is approachable in a particular way. He is not approachable in your way or my way. We have done a disservice to the body of Messiah by humanizing God so much that we have put him in a condition where anything goes and God will just accept me because he's just so good. Well, he is good and just. He is merciful and judgment. He is all of these things. And so he tells the people, now these are people he loves. These are people he's drawn out of Egypt. These are people he's done miracle after miracle for. And Sherry, he is setting aside these people and saying, you're going to be chosen. You are the chosen people. Yeah. You're going to be my royal treasure. These are people that have his heart. And yet he commands them, don't you dare come towards this mountain until I tell you.
Right.
If you show up, I will kill you. We need to have that heart of God to go understand he's holy. Right. And we want to walk in that holiness, and we will be the treasure in those moments.
But he also provides a way.
Always provides a way.
He provides the way.
Yeah, always provides the way.
Through this consecration and this getting ready. And I thought it was interesting when the shofar sounds.
Yeah.
I wonder who's blowing these shofars.
Yeah, buddy, when it sounds, you got to be ready.
Shofars play such an important role in the calling together of the people. We know that in the last days, what are we going to hear? Yeah. The shofar sound is announcing the return of the King. And it's laid right here in this encounter and in this marriage supper and this what God is doing here. The shofar sound to alert the people. Yes, I'm calling you. I'm calling you forth. And we will hear that sound again. We will hear that again.
Let's finish up this little chapter here, and then in our next commentary, we're going to pick up some pieces, particularly chapter 20. We're going to talk about the 10 statements, and we'll talk a little bit about the Haftorah and how it connects. In the morning, this is verse 16, in the morning of the third day, there was thundering and lightning, a thick cloud on the mountain, the blast of the exceedingly loud shofar, exceedingly loud. That's interesting. It means it covered all.
They all could hear.
They could all hear it, right? All the people in the camp trembled. Moses brought the people out of the camp to meet God. They stood at the lowest part of the mountain. Now the entire Mount Sinai was in smoke because Adonai had descended upon it in fire.
Wow.
The smoke ascended like a smoke of a furnace. The whole mountain quaked greatly. When the sound of the shofar grew louder and louder, Moses spoke, and God answered him with a thunderous sound. Then Adonai came down on Mount Sinai at the top of the mountain. Adonai called to Moses to the top of the mountain. Moses went up, and Adonai said, "Go down and warn the people, lest they break through to see Adonai, and many of them die. Even the Kohanim who come near to Adonai must consecrate themselves, so that Adonai does not break out against them." Moses said to Adonai, "The people cannot come up to Mount Sinai, for you are the one who warned us, saying, set boundaries around the mountain, consecrate it. Adonai said to him, go down, you are going to come back up, you and Aaron are with you, but do not let the Kohanim or the people break through. Moses went down and told them. We're going to end here because this is a powerful moment. This is a moment when the cloud descends, the fire descends, the voice of God descends, and he has a conversation again with Moses, and the people are watching this mountain just consumed with God.
Yeah.
Now, this is different. They've seen a fire leading them by night. They've seen a cloud leading them. They've seen miracles. But at this moment, shaking, earthquake type stuff, fire, and smoke. This will be reminiscent because it will come back to us again in the book of Acts.
Mm-hmm.
About 50 days after Passover, there's fire and there's smoke and there's shaking and there's a miracle happening in people's lives in the book of Acts, chapter 1 and chapter 2. Mm-hmm. And we see that here set up. And it's incredible.
It's amazing.
It's incredible. So we'll come back with another commentary on this great Parsha. We'll pick up a little bit of our Haftorah and we'll jump in to what is actually going to happen while Moses is back up on the mountain, the 10 statements. Until that time, God bless you and shalom.
Shalom.